Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing a video on 5 common mistakes that a lot of riders make when they're doing their handstyle and their tagging. So this is a video more aimed at sort of beginning riders and younger riders, but everyone can really take things from it. And I also want people to understand that obviously these aren't set rules and they don't apply to everyone. I'm pretty sure people have made these sort of mistakes as I quote them, and their tags are amazing, and there's so many different styles that I can't really, that don't really apply to this. But for the most part, these are what I think are sort of fundamental mistakes that people begin to make. And yeah, let's get into it. Okay guys, so the first common mistake that I see a lot of riders do is an over-reliance on embellishments to their tag. So what I mean by that is things like halos, quotation marks, underlines, arrows, even clouds, and worst of all, fake drips to their tags. You don't want to be focusing on this when you're beginning and starting out. These just detract from your actual letter structure and letter styles. So I'd much prefer a tag that's consistent and focuses on the letters itself with maybe a simple underline and halo than one that is just so overbearing with different doodads here and there. So if we try that, and then we go ahead and add a halo with different quotations and a very intricate underline, and then maybe some arrows, and then something like this, and then drips, it all just becomes too much and doesn't look like you know what you're doing. It's just like you weren't happy with your tag initially, so you tried to make it better, but then it just kept getting worse and worse, and then you just gave up, So when you first start out, focus on the letter structures, the letter spacing, and being consistent with that. And then once you're more established, start doing the other stuff. A lot of newer riders might get sucked in by seeing more established graffiti riders being able to pull off these fake drips and these clouds around their tags, but that's way down the track. You want to focus on your tag and the structure of it first. A mistake that I see a lot of younger riders and beginning riders start out doing is they don't focus on their letter proportions and the sizes between their letters and making that consistent. I think there's these moments where they get wild and blood rushes to their head and then to their hand, and then they just have a really sort of spontaneous moment that blows out their whole tag, and it just makes it look really bad. So if we take an example, say my word is cars. If I have really consistent letters at first, but then I get this moment where it just goes like that, it just doesn't look good. Even though you might have been feeling it in the moment, when you take a step back, you'd much prefer something that was consistent throughout the whole of your tag, nice and controlled, nice and clean, nice and in sync with each other. And then if we go ahead and analyze this tag, you can see that the spacing between each letter is in fact consistent. Whereas in the previous tag, it was medium spacing between it and then a large blown out letter like this. Of course, there's times where you can start doing crazy stuff like that, but when you're beginning and first starting out, focus on the proportions between your letters and the sizes being consistent. You don't want a tag that just has willy-nilly proportions and sizes like this. You might have a big C, then a little a, and then a really large R, and then a sort of skinny S, and then some underlines and stuff like that. That just looks horrible, If you're going to have this sort of wider type of tag, then make sure it's consistent throughout each of the letters. Make sure your C is large, your A, your R, and your S, and then when you step back, you understand there's a logic to all these letters, and they all are in sync with one another. Of course, that doesn't mean to say that each of your letters has to be the exact same proportion as one another, but in saying that, there always has to be a logic and a sort of understanding to each of your tags. So again, we can see that if we do have skinny and small letters, at least there's a logic. We have a skinny letter, then a large letter, then a skinny letter, then a large letter, and it all works together. The next point, guys, is kind of similar to the embellishment point in that a lot of beginning riders and younger riders get sucked in by having huge markers or the most expensive marker or the mop that drips the most, and think that's going to lead to their tag being good. It's really not, and it actually makes it harder for you because you don't focus on the actual letters and you just get carried away by, you know, the thickness of the marker or how many drips there are. It just detracts away from it. And actually there's a certain skill to tagging with fat markers that you're really not going to have if you don't have your letters down pat. So say your word was ink or something, a lot of younger writers, they don't know how to use the thick markers, and then they just don't understand like the angles and everything, and it just looks like a really disgusting tag, you know. And then they go ahead and add the embellishments as well, and it all just comes together as something you don't ever want to look at. I'd much prefer people practicing with a simple ballpoint pen or a pencil or just a really thin marker, and understanding that that's what's going to help them progress their letter structure and letter styles. You don't need these expensive things or these big things to help you. If your word was in fact ink, you'd much rather just have a consistent tag like that, rather than not understanding how the big marker works. And this is the same for spray paint as well. Don't be sucked in by the flares and the huge chisel tips and stuff like that. I've always said if you can tag with a skinny cap and do it well, then you know you have style. And then you can go ahead and move on to these cooler looking caps. But at first, don't at all get sucked in by that. Practice with basically the skinniest marker or the skinniest pen and just work out the letter proportions, experiment with different styles, and don't go and waste your time or waste your money on other graffiti implements. The next common mistake I see is people not understanding that a hand style is more about the motion of your hand and the muscle memory built into your hand, rather than trying to emulate a tag that you once did or practiced 1,000 times and you loved it and then you try to go out and do it. That's not how a tag should be. People are too focused on sketching their tag and sort of feeling it out and making sure everything is correct and in the right proportion and exactly how they like it, when that in fact isn't how a tag should be. You shouldn't be sort of rigid and controlled about it and umming and ahhing over what's the best sort of angle and stuff like that. A tag is spontaneous and it's in the moment. You don't want to retracing it in your mind how you think it once would have been. You're much rather better doing it quickly and spontaneously, and of course stuffing up, but if you do stuff up, you're getting the muscle memory built into your hand that then will correct itself and come to a tag that you actually do think is good, or a tag that will actually be good. I'd much rather say go ahead and just thrash paper, thrash black books, practicing spontaneous and in the moment tags, put on some music, put on some watch some TV or something like that, just doing tag after tag that's fast, it's quick. Of course you're going to stuff up, but you're just going to correct yourself and you're going to build in the muscle memory in your hand, rather than kind of like figure out what's the best angle for this S and stuff like that and getting it nice and correct, and then you'll move on to the L and then it's nice and angled like that. That's not the purpose and the mentality you should have with your tag. Okay guys, so the last point, or the last mistake I have, is writers not understanding that the black book isn't going to be anywhere near what the streets are going to be. Whether you do it legally or illegally, you can't be confined to your black book and sort of plan out a tag so delicately and so intricately in your black book when you're not going to be afforded the time or the luxury that you have at the comfort of your own house or wherever you're sort of tagging in your black book. So don't be too precious with your tags in your black book. Don't, overly plan it or sketch it like I've stated. Understand that in the streets it's such a different environment. There's so many different variables and changes that you're not going to have the time or the luxury that you need to pull off something that you've planned ahead. It really does have to be spontaneous to exist in the streets. And if you do want to improve in that sort of realm, the only way to do it is practice and practicing in the streets. So if that is the direction that you're taking it, you gotta be in that environment. There's nothing at your house that can simulate what it's like out there. I know it seems a bit dramatic, but it really is true. So that's all the tips that I have for today. Those are all the mistakes I could point out. I'm sure there's more, and I'm sure a lot of writers don't do these, or this won't be um, necessary for some, but these are what I thought were the fundamentals and could have been interesting points to pick up on. So if you liked it, definitely go ahead and subscribe and leave a comment on what you think, and stay tuned for more graffiti related videos and reviews. Thanks.